You so much for that beautiful introduction and for including us in your very inspiring colloquium. I was able to catch some of it yesterday, and I'm so glad it's being recorded so that I can catch more a bit later. So, hello, welcome, good morning. Today, we're going to share with you a bit about our work that we've been doing using arts-based methods to invite migrants to communicate their stories in their own words and shape those words into songs. So in the time that we have together, we'll go on a behind-the-scenes tour of the Petit-Chât Arrival Center and share with you this project that we've been doing for the past several years using poetry and songwriting up until the pandemic lockdown in March 2020. And we'll talk a bit more about the center itself and then share with you kind of a recreation of the writing of one of our songs. So get your singing voices ready. Oop. There we go. So I think that's kind of the overview, and then we're going to go ahead and actually introduce ourselves so you know who we are, not just these floating heads on a Zoom screen. And so I'll start. My name is Marieke or marieke, marieke, whatever you would like for pronunciation is totally fine because there's so many vowels. I'm a musician, I'm a songwriter, I'm also a yoga teacher, a writer. I'm a traveling sole citizen of the world. In the United States, they would say I wear many hats. So I used to work as a park ranger for the national parks as well. And as Kathy mentioned, and super thanks to Kathy for helping organize all of this, by the way, don't want to forget to say that. I did study for my PhD in sustainability education, and it was through that experience that I worked with a colleague to develop the method of songwriting that Sarah and I have been using with poetry to write these songs. And it's called Story to Song. So the name kind of explains it, but I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later this morning. So Sarah, you want to go ahead?
Oh, okay. Hello, everybody. Yeah, thank you so much for inviting us to join in this amazing colloquium. Yeah, I'm a poet and an author, originally from the UK, but I've lived in Belgium for many years. I write children's books in English, but some have been translated into Dutch and French. And I organize projects and workshops and storytelling around these stories. For the last 10 years, I've run poetry workshops with asylum seekers and open mic evenings. And the last 4 years, I've worked together with Marieke on this project that we're going to tell you about. And I'm also a legal guardian for unaccompanied minors. Okay.
Thank you. I guess, yeah, I should probably tell you, I'm from the United States. I spent the last 4 years in Brussels. My husband studied at the VUB for his doctorate. And so that's how I was lucky enough to meet Sarah. Right now I'm living in northern France, just north of Lille. Okay, now you have a little bit more context. So now you know who we are and where we've been spending our Monday afternoons the last several years before the pandemic. So now I want to talk a little bit about why at least we think that it's important to share our stories. And there's a poem here that Sarah's posted on our poetry wall and a quote that I really love. I find at least that storytelling is this kind of basic human way that we can help to make sense of our lives. And I think that each person is this culmination of just these thousands and thousands of experiences that become the stories and the narratives that we tell about ourselves. And then as we weave them together, it shapes us into who we are and it helps form our identity. So in the United States, again, I guess I did mention the United States before, but now you know why. I'm from there. We have this saying that we use, and maybe you're familiar with it. If a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound? So I feel this way about the stories that comprise a human life, particularly for people who are in a space of limbo, who are maybe kind of a little bit on the outside of society, not always able to participate, or who don't feel welcome to participate and share their voice. if these people's stories aren't told, do they exist? And what happens after they're gone to their stories, to the memories, to the real experiences that shaped their lives? And for refugees and asylum seekers, or people who are marginalized in some way, what does it mean for their story to be told by someone else? Does that story change? Does it change other people's perception of them? And, for example, if someone else tells their story, like the media, from certain perspectives, this may or may not be an accurate reflection of that person's true experience. And so what does that mean for their experience being in this new place, not being able to share their story? And so we have found that art is a way that we can help create space for people to tell their real stories, their truths, and that sharing in this way can also invite people to have discussions and exchanges in a place where everyone, is on equal footing. So, for example, people are free to share their stories, but also their opinions. And so we've had lots of people. One week, someone might share that they believe that the meaning of life is to be happy. And the next week, someone might see that and say, yeah, I don't think that's the meaning of life, but it's okay. I mean, this is a safe, free space to share those ideas. It's an art space. And, one song a person from Gaza wrote, and the next week, another person from Gaza said, that is not what life is like in Gaza. But it's okay. I mean, it's part of that exchange. And our work, which we're going to tell you more about, is really to show up and create this space, kind of this space, every 2 hours on a Monday, where we can bear witness to human experiences and honor them, and also welcome them to know that we want to hear their stories. So Sarah's going to talk a little bit about that now also.
Yeah, making people feel welcome and sharing ideas and experiences was a vital part of our workshop. I would often go around inviting people to the poetry sessions, and they would ask, well, will it help with my application? What's it gonna do for me? And I would say, not directly, but it will help in other ways, because their life is so centered around the obtaining of papers that there's literally no room or space for anything else. And it's a very stressful existence for people. Life is kind of the experience of filling in the forms and saying the right things, doing the right things, so that they can get this this paper, so that they can have a prospect to stay in this country. And being invited to do something like this, which feels kind of unusual but also useless at first, becomes a way to live for a moment as a human being, not just an asylum seeker. To exist together with others as an individual, with opinions, with preferences, with ideas, and not just a number in the application process. So to feel human again. Yeah.
Do you want to keep talking about poetry? So this is Sarah's area of expertise. So I'll talk a little bit about songwriting in a moment.
So yeah, I used to do it I've worked there for about 10 years now, and I used to offer poetry in a much more formal setting. I would like in a classroom, I would be given a room, and I would take a poem and we would translate it into different languages and discuss it. And this was a real starting point. I found that poetry was a real starting point for people to talk about their own experiences, because poetry is a very powerful medium. It's short, for one thing, so you can just take a poem and work on that poem. It's personal and it's universal at the same time, and it's also a medium that people from other countries really appreciate. More so, in a way, it's more mainstream than it is in our culture. For example, poets like Mahmoud Darwish, they mean a lot to people from Gaza, for people from Palestinians. Rumi and the Persian poets, they are also very well known, very well loved among the residents. Arabic poets like Nisa Kabani. It's like you're talking about a friend almost, So if you start with something like that, it's like you've got a connection already with people. And because poets, yeah, in the Middle East, like I say, very revered and respected, and poets have a sort of pivotal place. They're a kind of people who can talk about anything in a way. So yeah, poetry is very important because it was a means to start off on another footing, and it was also important to use as many languages as possible because that made people feel included and recognized. We had a poetry wall, which you can see here, where we hung poems in different languages, and this was something people really appreciated because they would come along and they would recognize themselves. You know, they would recognize their language, but also they would recognize the experience that was written there, and they would come up and they would say, "Yeah, this is me. This is my experience," and it made people feel less alone because yeah, so it was very important. It was a very important connection. So the poetry was very important. But later on, I moved to a more open space where outside, which we'll talk about later, which was in a way where people could more connect more, and then the music came along, which is even more so because that's a universal element.
That's a great segue. The music came along and voila, here's the why songwriting slide. Thanks, Sarah. So, I mean, so yes, so I brought the music and I was so lucky to meet Sarah on my first day as a volunteer at the Fedazil Arrival Center. And so I mentioned that, that I studied sustainability education. And so for me, songwriting and sustainability are really connected. And this is one reason that it's really important to me. And so sustainability, I mean, okay, there's lots of different definitions for sustainability, but in brief, my understanding and from the perspective that I began studying it was that it's the idea, from an environmental and economic development, those have been kind of the main focuses or perspectives. It's the idea is to find a way for a system, any system, to be able to thrive in a balanced manner and in perpetuity, so it carries on, it sustains itself without compromising the ability of other systems to do the same, to also thrive. And in addition, it also means that this system has to develop healthy ways to bounce back or restore balance when external forces, all those things that happen that are out of our control or system's control, that might cause it to lose its equilibrium. And so my focus in my PhD research was actually looking at an individual human system, and the idea that to create sustainability on a global scale, we really needed to begin with the individual. And so there's a lot more that I could say about that, but it's kind of beyond the scope of the time we have this morning. But in brief, my work was with another colleague who is also a musician, and we started noticing that by inviting people to share their life stories and move through the creative process of shaping those stories into songs with us as kind of creative musical guides, that this helped to bring their systems into balance. Could be cathartic, it could also be therapeutic. It helped them find meaning, different meanings from the many, many possible meanings of an experience. And it helped them to begin creating what I call self-sustainability. So it's really that focus of the self. And I found this to be true for myself as well. When something happens, and certainly in a pandemic, lots of things happen that are beyond our control that can throw us out of balance. I can actually write a song from a story about that, perform that song, sing, and find équilibré and to balance my own system. So it was our hope that doing this at the center might be able to create a bit of a pause and create some balance, and also empower people. Because being invited, I think, to be seen and to share your story can really be empowering, and to step into that role of being an artist, a poet, a musician as well. So really it's not new work. We happened to look at a very specific way of basically writing a folk song from the first person perspective. And so that's where, this method comes into being, and we called it Story to Song. And so the method itself is named after the process. We begin with a story and we end with a song. I hesitate to say finished song because a folk song goes into the world and takes on its own life. But the essential steps are that one, we start with a story, which a person can write or speak. We look for a universal message from the story, which becomes the chorus. And so if you listen to any kind of popular or folk song, the chorus really tends to be, it could be an emotion, it could be a message, a call to action, but it's something that most people will find familiar. So the desire to belong, to be loved, to find your soulmate, to live a peaceful life. And so what we do is we would then shape those words into a chorus, trying to use as many of the words as, from the story as possible. And you know, we would then ask someone to sing through those words if they wanted to. This is a scary part. We won't ask you to sing in that way this morning. Sometimes I would do a lot of the singing because people might be nervous, or is like in a foreign language. It could be in many different languages, only one of which they were really familiar with. And so what we would end up with, you know, and every day was different. Sometimes we'd only write a little bit. Sometimes we'd write a whole song and it would just come into being really fast. But we'd wind up with verses that basically are the action parts of the story. So they're the unfolding of the story. And then coming back to the chorus, you know, this happened, this happened, this happened. And that's why never give up, or like, I want to believe, you know, that there'll be an end to borders and judgment. And so there we have the song. Then the next part, like is what we're doing today, is sharing that experience and also sharing the song, so that hopefully a person somewhere on the other side of the world who's never met the storyteller who shared the story that became the song, they can listen, they can make a personal connection with the chorus, because that may be something familiar to their own life. And then even if, and especially for a difficult story from a migrant, I hope that most people don't have to go through that, but they can say, oh, you know, so I have felt this, so now I can see that story, and that person can become familiar to me. They can make a connection. There can be empathy, solidarity, you know, all those important words. And hopefully they won't see that person as someone, you know, to be feared. And so, for example, some of the chorus themes, and we'll share one a little bit later, but this idea, never give up, is one of the songs. I want a peaceful life. I could be you, you could be me. I am the change. And so that then, so we have that songwriting, we have story, we have poetry, and there's so much meaning in each of these arts-based methods. And then there's the role of music, you know, because music is something that is almost beyond words. And I think that that is one reason why, you know, it can work so well, especially in this kind of project and this setting where people are coming with lots of different words in different languages, different emotions. But music, and many of the residents even communicated this to us, it's a universal language. So we have this kind of primal response to sound and to rhythm. You start tapping your foot, moving your body. I mean, we literally have instruments that are kind of built in, even if you don't want to sing. You kind of almost can't help kind of following along with your body. And music also, I think, is this way that when it can be difficult in words alone to express an experience, especially one that might be painful, or if English is not your first language, or you know, trying to kind of communicate through all these different languages, you can communicate through sound and the melody that you develop, the emotion that comes from your story. You know, so our bodies can express those sounds and rhythms. So I think that, yeah, I think that we're innately responsive in that way, and that also our bodies respond. Our bodies kind of respond, our nervous systems respond to music. So people have mentioned that just even listening, not singing, but just listening to the music, you know, can be soothing. We would often start our sessions when there was no one around. It was just us and the pigeons and like the rain and the hail in the winter. And we would just start singing, and then people would sort of just like appear, and they would come and they would want to know what was happening. So now you know about us, a little bit about our project and why we believe in arts-based methods for helping people give voice to their experience. Sarah's going to talk to you a little bit about the center itself, just a brief kind of history in case you haven't been there before.
Yeah, so this imposing military-style building by the canal has quite a history. For a long time, it was a barracks housing soldiers, and then it was turned into a prison for wartime collaborators. Later, it became the Army's Recruiting and Selection Center. And in 1986, it was converted into a reception center for asylum seekers. So it's a pretty old and bleak looking place, massive inside, in desperate need of renovation, and obviously not the most attractive or hospitable of buildings to arrive, to come to. So which is why it made it even more important for us to create a warm, welcoming place within it. When we first worked there, it was a center where people stayed for many months and even years while waiting for their the conclusion of their asylum process. But recently, it's turned into a transit center, the first port of call for people arriving in the country, where they will register their application and then stay only a few days before being sent to other centers throughout Belgium. So obviously that changed our work quite a bit, because we didn't have like much continuity. There were always new people, but yeah, that was the situation.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I think it's important to kind of show that bit of that juxtapositioning. I mean, for us, you know, we obviously we really enjoyed going there, and it was this really unique experience that we looked forward to each week. But for people living there, it could be really difficult, and some living conditions were not all that pleasant. And so, I mean, some people called it a prison. And plus, we were choosing to be there. And when you register for asylum in Belgium, you don't really have a choice, you know, where you live while you're waiting for that decision from your application. So we're going to take a little tour now of Petit-Chât, at least from our perspective. These are all photos that we've taken, and you can see there's an arrow pointing down to where people line up at the start of the day to apply for asylum. Here's the very inviting lineup place, and there's limited spaces, so only a certain number of people each day can apply, because there's limited beds space for people in the center. So here's the entrance, and do you see Sarah in the photo? She's all the way back there. You probably can't find her, it's too small. But if you get to go there, if you've been there, you can take a look at that photo that's on the wall and maybe find her. So right, so we were happy to be there. But it is austere, it's intimidating. You can see this is just behind Sarah, it's the security center. You go through, and we started to have to wear name tags. You know, security was heightened over the time that we were there. And so it's also called Little Castle in English, so you can kind of see a little bit of kind of just how big it is. This is only the kind of first big courtyard. There are others. And then you can see on the right, this is where we set up our poetry and songwriting. We were right by the medical center, so people were constantly coming and going. And as Sarah said, it turned into a transit center, so people would register for asylum and they'd be taken on a tour, and we actually became part of the tour. So they'd be like, here's the medical center, here's the cafeteria, here's the poet and songwriter. And you know, and that was kind of fun. Sarah's going to actually tell you now. You can't quite see it because it's hidden behind this post, but she's going to show you our poetry wall and talk a little bit more about kind of poetry and art.
Yeah, so I kind of like this slide, because there are papers that we've hung up which we're working on, and next to it is an open door. Yeah, this, in a way, I think that kind of symbolizes a little bit how we saw poetry. This poetry is really an opportunity to enter into another world. That's the power of poetry. It evokes other places, other times, other worlds. It can, in that way, comfort and provide solace, recognition of your own experiences. It can inspire, it can encourage. So yeah, as I said before, I used to work in a more informal setting, in the enclosure of a classroom, and now we set up our sessions outside. So this is like literally a space without borders, no walls, no doors. We were just outside, and everyone was welcome. And I found that this made it much more accessible for people. And it's a little bit like how we were saying, art is a space without borders or limitations, where people can be free to express themselves. So I think we reached many more people when we were outside and just in the corridor, and it had more of a symbolic meaning than when you have a particular classroom and people don't know what's going on, and they don't know whether they would join in or not, whether it's something for them or not. And this way we could, this was an open space. And then, yeah, marieke, like I said, came along and brought music with her, which made it even more so, as music is really a universal language. So our office, yeah, became a place, a space that people pass through and which belonged to everybody.
Yes, so, and this idea of this creative space without walls is also inspired by, or at least it's fitting with it. I found there's a scholar who's worked a lot with migrants, O'Neill, and she writes about what she calls the hyphen or the potential space. And this is that idea that art creates moments or windows of opportunity for transformation, for creativity, for kind of that magic that anything can happen, and that it's vital to keep these spaces open for resistance, for dialogue and debate on crucial issues like migration and asylum, so that everyone, especially people who are personally going through that experience, can be part of that discussion, that debate, and that research. So we're going to take you through the recreation, in very quick recreation of writing one of our songs, and then we'll have an opportunity to sing together. And you can see, so Google translates. When this became more of a transitory center and we didn't always have people who could speak different languages, we would do our best with the technology that we had to explain what we were doing, which wasn't always clear right at the start, but we'd start with a blank page and people would help us post that page. And and then we would have the start of this really exciting creative adventure, which we thought was really exciting, but that often people would be maybe a little bit nervous to write. Some people didn't want their story on the page, or some people felt like, well, I don't really have anything, that you would want to put into a song. But here, Sarah is very good at drawing people in.
The first words are really exciting because we have a blank page.
No.
What you feel you want to express in your language.
N'importe quelle langue, n'importe comment.
It's very exciting. The first words.
Very exciting.
First
Like
words are
anything can happen. Oh my goodness. And so in this afternoon, we had a man from Burundi come to write Swahili on the page. And so I wanted to share just these little videos because they give you a little kind of more sensory or visceral sense of what it was like to be there with the sound of the writing on the page. And, there's people in the background talking, there's sirens, there's horns. You can see like the tape is like not even sticking to the door, and sometimes we'd have wind and rain and the papers would go flying, so there's like a bit of chaos, but that's okay. It's just part of that, like, just realness, the authenticity of of being there. So here we go. So we'd get these first words on the page, and this was kind of your sort of typical experience, and then we would have words in another language that we would then try to kind of translate into other languages. So we ended up with a mix of French and English, and it's not, exact translation, but you'll hear in the song in a little bit, just kind of a little bit more of this translation. You can see it here. So then we'd have, we have here, we had the first words and then this little bit of translation underneath. And then we started realizing maybe we want to change the order. So we start drawing arrows, we start numbering the phrases so we can figure out, kind of what order we might like to sing in. And we're using like Google Translate and gesticulations and people sharing their ideas of what this means. And then people coming and writing in lots of different languages. And so we're doing our best to kind of make sure that they have space to come and write, and are thinking how we're going to include all of these different words and ideas, because we want to, as much as possible, include everyone, in the song, even though typically a song is anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes, so you can't include everything. And yeah, we end up with this really beautiful tapestry of words in all these different languages. And so we're looking for that kind of that message, or at least one of many that becomes the chorus, and how to follow that in the verses of the song. And I think, the idea is that, we're really trying to kind of honor that moment for exchange. And Sarah's going to talk a little bit about just kind of this particular day before we get to the end of the song that maybe you want to sing with us.
Yeah, I just wanted to say this is a very busy day that we're looking at. And some days there are many people who join in like this, but some days it was just us and the pigeons. And it didn't matter. I mean, it was important just to be there. And every single time it was different. So we could never predict anything. In that way, I think it's the exciting element, because you just didn't know what was going to happen, but also nothing could happen. Yeah, of course, on the best days like this, where you have a song that comes to exist that never existed before. So that's amazing. But sometimes you could be pretty disheartened because, yeah, it was bad weather, it was cold, we were always outside, and you go there and you make all these arrangements and you think everything's going to happen, and nothing happens and nobody's there, and it feels like nothing is happening. So that's also the reality. Of course, we're going to show you the very good times, but that's also part of it. I think that just being there, and we used to wonder, yeah, does it matter if we're here or not? Sometimes we would think, but we learned to see it differently. We learned to see that maybe nothing will happen, but if we don't go, nothing can happen. So we have to make that possibility happen. We have to create that possibility. And that's why it's important not to have any expectations for how the project will turn out, and simply let the experience unfold every time in its own way. In a way, it's like the writing of a poem or a song. It kind of comes to you, and you don't sort of also know how it's going to end up, how it will be received, what seeds it will sow. So yeah, now we're looking at a day when there were a lot of things flying around, a lot of ideas, but sometimes it was very quiet.
And it's true. It's really like that potential space, right? So we're there kind of just listening and being open and helping to kind of just create this safe space, where we're all there to do something positive, and also creative, and try to create something beautiful from some often really, not so beautiful experiences that people have gone through. And so, like Sarah said, I think it was really important for us to be there. And to be kind of like focusing on something positive, right? So we'd enter into this discussion and we create this little community of practice every 2 hours, and we'd have these discussions and we talk about what we want to say to the world through the song and how we want to say it. Do we want a bridge, a refrain, a chorus, and how can we include at least some of everyone's contributions, in the song? And obviously, like life and, this asylum process experience could get really messy. We'd have arrows all over the place, and then we'd post a new page and we try to make it tidier so that we could sing together. We also brought a little bag of rhythm instruments, and this way everybody could participate, and even if they didn't want to sing. So, and we got to this point, it was really great to pass around the instruments and sing together. So that's our little segue, passing around virtual instruments. And we have our song here and all the lyrics. And even though it's like probably, maybe not the best Zoom etiquette, and it's going to be crazy, we would love if you wanted to unmute yourself and sing with us, because I think it's more important for our voices to all be heard together. As many of you who want to sing, there's obviously no pressure. So I'm going to get my ukulele. It's my instrument of choice because it's smaller than the piano I grew up playing. So it's easier to, as a traveling person myself, take it around the world. And so I'm going to sing through the chorus one time. So you'll learn it, I think, really fast because it's a pretty simple melody to follow. And then I'll sing through a second time in case you want to start singing. Feel free to join in whenever you'd like. We have a few more minutes here before we go to questions. So we thought it's more important to actually do the singing. That's like the crux of it than to just talk. In art, we want to do, right? So Hakuna Matata, Tushikane mikono tutafika salama nabila sila. And this is, we often share, we have a book with all these songs that Sarah will show you, but we share that the person we wrote this predominantly with was the man who you saw writing the beginning. His name was Buddy, and we share his name because he ended up going back to Burundi and he passed away. So it's a way to really honor and remember him. Hopefully you can hear me. Hakuna Matata, tushikane mikono, tutafika salama, nabila sila, nabila sila. Ready? Hakuna Matata, tushikane mikono, tutafika salama, nabila sila, nabila sila. If they open the borders, where would everybody go? Like a bird, no pain, no visa, just the power of our wings and our hearts to decide. Hakuna Matata, tushikane mikono, tutafika salama, nabila sila, nabila sila. If they open the borders, where would you go? Would you choose one place or migrate? I would make a new life in Belgium. Hakuna Matata, tushikane mikono, tutafika salama, nabila sila, nabila sila. Don't worry, place your hand in mine. We will arrive safely without violence. We will arrive. Zindagi aram dashta bashim. Relax, live for all time. Africa, le jugi de nu. Fek finu, jugi de fune. Si tu savais à quel point tu me manques, combien je pense à toi. I come from Africa and I find the whole world. Nabila sila, Hakuna Matata. Voila. Hopefully you were singing. I didn't hear too many voices, but that's okay. you can listen and sing along. We'll share our website in just a few minutes. So we're coming to the end of our part, and then if you want to ask questions, but I just wanted to show you just a little bit about how we kind of did our best to create this community with all of these travelers for a few moments on a Mondays. And here, this woman is actually using Google Translate over my Google Translate description of what we're doing here at the center, so she can share with them the video call on the right that she's doing, hovering over all the words for her family at home. You know, and people, they wrote, they shared in words through Google Translate, and just, all different languages, what they wanted to say, and what they wanted for their life, and what the experience of all being together meant for them. So they also wrote on the pages that we would leave before we had our poetry wall. That's why we ended up with the poetry wall, because we kind of made a mess. And so this is one of my favorites. But I think, like Sarah said, I think really one of the most important things is that we can actually just all be together, even for a moment, as human beings, as people. And that's really the most important thing. And so Sarah, do you want to add a little bit here at the end?
I thought I would show you that we made a book of the poems and songs of migration, which, as you can see just here. And in this book we have I think 11 different languages and songs from 18 different countries. So that's very exciting that we were able to put the songs that definitely, we have many more songs than that, but that we made something of the songs, and that we've been going around and singing the songs in different places. We're going to do it, in fact, this Saturday in the Museum of Migration in Brussels. So yeah, and I want to thank you for inviting us to share our work with you. And yeah, we'd be very, very happy to answer any questions or any feedback that you can give us.
Yeah, and maybe we'll share with Kathy the details for the little concert workshop we're going to do on Saturday, in case you're near Brussels, and you can go. We also here have just a quick, here's our website and email. So if we don't have time for everyone's questions, we'd love to hear from you. And thank you again so much.
Thank you both for the presentation. It was really great. I think it really enlightened the whole day. I have shared the website on the chat. I think I'll also add your email so that people can contact you if needed. So if anybody has any question about the project, about what we're doing, feel free to go ahead. But in the meantime, if nobody has any question, I do have one. You mentioned this book with many languages featured, and I was curious to know if in the process you also managed to learn the languages of the people you have encountered, like at least on a basic level or maybe more.
Well, I can say I wish I had. My daughter's learning Arabic, so I'm kind of learning the basic of Arabic from her. I think Arabic would be a very important language. But of course in Belgium we've got French, Netherlands, and English, a little bit of German. So we're kind of used to sort of speaking in these kind of mixtures of languages. And so obviously my knowledge was very basic of these other languages, but I think it was there is a kind of a language almost in maybe a language of welcome, or a language of wanting to talk to people, that you can actually communicate very, much more than you think, with just the languages that you have. So and we were amazed actually how a lot of the asylum seekers, they were really polyglot, they knew so many languages, that was amazing, their language ability. So we usually had to ask, oh, you have a friend who could translate, and we would find somebody within their community who would have the ability to translate from Arabic to English or French to, so we managed somehow. But I think, I speak for myself, my knowledge of other languages stays quite basic.
That is not at all true. I mean, I'm honoring your truth, but I think you're being modest. Sarah speaks English, she speaks French and Netherlands. I speak English and French, and increasingly more and more people were coming from Central and South America. So I speak a little bit of Spanish if it doesn't turn immediately into French. And so that was, that was a really interesting exchange, especially because I'm from Arizona most recently and going back there. So, talking about borders and like that it's easier to go to Belgium than the United States from Mexico, and Central South America is kind of crazy. But I think Sarah's right. I mean, so like we learned words, we learned phrases, and part of it is just that gesture of welcome and sharing some of the words we know, so that it's like that equal footing we talk about. We really wanted to, even if we don't speak all the languages, to include them in the poetry wall and in the songs.
Of course, I guess learning Spanish might be, oh, actually no, because, well, I don't know, it depends if you know already French, because then some languages are more connected and you can learn it faster, because Arabic is quite a challenge. So Sarah, good luck. It's quite impressive.
Yeah.
But definitely is going to be very useful, especially if you're going to continue working there, sharing your work.
Yeah.
We only have 2 minutes and I don't see any other question. I don't know if you want to maybe share something else about the project, ongoing projects, or
we have 2 minutes, so I can sing one more quick song.
Of course.
So, and this is, again, I apologize. So this is in English, but I think it's a really nice one because it's called I Am a Word. And we wrote it from a man from Syria who was explaining in Arabic to another resident from Gaza that if he could really change the world, he would want to be a word of hope and love and live in every home. So I think this is maybe a good one to finish on. And it's short, and you can still sing along if you want, because the end of each line is I am a word. I am a word of hope and love. I bring honor to the world. I will push the darkness away. Can I come to your house and stay? I am a word. I am the root of all resistance. I bring light for us to grow. I will push the sorrow away. Can I come to your heart and stay? I am a word. I am the life you left behind, the path that you now follow, the melody of your song, the place you can belong. I am a word of hope and love. I bring honor to the world. I will push the darkness away. Can I come to your house and stay? I am a word. And also making sure, so here we are, we're both, we were the volunteers going there, sharing all these stories, but I want to make sure that we also say thank you to all the people who were brave in sharing their stories with us and so generous, and who are here today through these songs and through these words and images.